Hi everybody, this is Dr. Cook. I want to take the opportunity to walk you through a little bit of APA. We're going to look at the references and look at citations. After I've talked about references and citations and giving you some pointers, I will then point out what you need to do for the skills assessment for APA. So we're going to walk through the documentation and APA format. So keep in mind that you have to use a reference page in any kind of citation because you want to give credit to the source in order to prevent plagiarism. What you're doing is actually giving the reader enough information to retrieve and evaluate your sources. So you have to be as complete and thorough as possible in order for one to be able to check your sources. When are citations necessary? Well, if you look at this, in all of these instances, you have to have sources and have to have citations. So there's some basic information that you need for all kind of references. And it's probably good to take notes and to actually write this down so that you will have it later on. You should always have the author, the date, the title of the article, source, page numbers, volume, issue, DOI if available, or URL, a web address if applicable, and the publication company. And everything that's on this list here goes in this order. So I would take a moment in your notes, write this down, because if you don't write it down, you're not going to actually remember this. So you can pause this video and in your notebook, write down each of these and make a note that this is in the order in which they come on the reference page. When you're done, start the video again. Some basic formats about the references page is this. It's always going to be the last numbered page of your report. So do not start your references at the end of the last paragraph. Make sure it always goes to the next page. And you're going to have the word references centered at the top of the page. Your margins are going to be 1 inch margins. You don't have to do anything with that because that is standard in Word. Everything again is double spaced with a hanging indent, and I'm going to show you that in just a second how to do that. You alphabetize by the last name or the first significant word, and I'll kind of give you an example in a minute of why I say the first significant word. Never put numbers on the references page, and you end all entries with a period except after a DOI or a web address. And that's important. So end all entries with a period except after a DOI or a web address. When writing the author's names, you are going to always use initials. You're going to use the first, the last name, and the first initial. If they give you the middle initial of an author, you're also going to use the middle initial. If you have more than one author, you're going to connect them with the so-called ampersand sign, which is the and sign. And you're going to put a comma. So let's look at an example. In this example, we have two authors. We have Jankovic, comma, J period, L period, because that's the middle initial. Then you have your comma. You have the ampersand sign. And then you have the next name, comma, E period, A period. If you have three authors, you're going to do the same thing. Make sure you have the commas in between the names, and before the last name, you use this so-called ampersand sign. The magic number to remember is 7. You can never have any more than 7 names listed. So numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 all will be listed. However, if you have 8 or more, because that exceeds the number 7, you will list the first 6, and then you will use the so-called ellipsis, which is dot, 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 and whatever the last author's name is, you would add that to the list. So if you have 8, you will do numbers 1 through 6, then ampersand sign, the dot, 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 and then you will list the 8th author. But all in all, you only have 7, so you can never go more than 7 names on the references page. When more than one author is listed, you always are going to list them the way they're presented in the article in the articles page. Basically, it goes in order of importance. So it might not be alphabetical order, but you would still list it exactly the way it's listed in the article. When listing the date, you always need the year, the month, and the date. You put the year first, then comes the month, then comes the day. You put whatever information you have. If you only have the year, you just put the year. If you have the year and the month, you do that. And if you have the year, month, and day, then you do that. Please don't leave out any information if they have that listed. In terms of capitalization, periodicals, newspapers, journals, magazines, the first letter of the first word of the article is capitalized. So when you're writing the title, you write it like a sentence. You only capitalize the first word of the title. Of course, the exception is if you have proper nouns and adjectives, you always capitalize them. And the first letter of the first word of a subtitle gets capitalized. So let's say there's a colon. Whatever comes after the colon is also capitalized. All the main words of the source names are capitalized. So, for instance, if it is the Journal of Medicine or Journal of Nursing, the J and the N are capitalized. But in the article title, you only capitalize the first word unless there is a colon in it. They also usually give you some extra information about journals and magazines. They give you the so-called volume number often, and they also give you the issue number. A lot of times it says VOL, and you can tell that it's volume, and the ISS or ISSUE for issue. In the order, it goes in the order that you put the volume first, and then you put your issue number. Volume numbers are always written in italics, and then the issue numbers are not written in italics, but they're written in parentheses. Never use P or PP. You simply hyphenate the page numbers. If there are consecutive or different page numbers, such as 14 through 18, comma, 20 to 25, if it is like that. In terms of web pages, these web pages direct readers as closely as possible to the information being cited. Make sure you check the web address to make sure it works. It should turn blue. Once it turns blue, click it. If it doesn't work, then you know that you typed in something wrong. So one exception to the P and the PP rule is if you have newspapers. This is going to be rare. We're generally not going to have them. But in a newspaper, they use letters, D6 to D8. That actually serves as the page numbers. So we would say PP for page numbers D6 through D8, because it's not clear that D6 and D8 are actually page numbers. Here's some miscellaneous rules. Italicize the titles of the source names, books, newspapers, journals. Do not use quotes with the titles of articles. Only list sources that are actually used in the report. So don't put anything on the reference page that you actually don't have in your paper. If a source has no author, you begin with the title. And if there's no date, you use ND. So DOI, they will list this. A DOI will serves as the purpose as a URL nowadays. And according to APA guidelines, listing the database where you got the article is not necessary. If you don't have a DOI, then you use the so-called URL, but you use the URL of the publisher or the book or the magazine. You do not use the URL of the database. If you do have a database or the DOI, you simply list the DOI as listed here. So let's look at this again and walk you through it. This would be the actual citation you would find on the library page. So going from left to right, the first thing we have is the name, and we use the last name, comma, first initial, period. There is no middle initial, so we don't put a middle initial here. We see that it is November 2009, so we put the date, 2000, or the year 2009, comma, November. After every section, you use a period. So this is the name section. This is the who. Then it's a period. This is the when. It's a period. So in your notebook, you can write who and then when. Now we have the what, and the what is the title. Titles are written like sentences. The U is capitalized. Everything else is written small. Period. Now we want to have the next section is where. So we have to say where it came from. And in this case, it comes from a journal. Journals are written in italics, and they're all capital letters, except for the minor words. So Community College or College Journal of Research and Practice. This is all the name of the journal. Then we have a comma because we're not finished with the journal. Volume 33, no space, issue 11, comma, and then the page numbers. There's a period after this because we're done. The last section is the so-called retrieval information. In this case, we have a DOI. Here's our DOI here. We list the DOI here. This is what we call a hanging indent. You will see that it is over on the left-hand side, but then you indent here. If there's no DOI, then you need to use some kind of retrieval information. So with a DOI, you simply write DOI. And if I can go back to the previous one, you write DOI like this. However, if you don't have a DOI, you must write retrieved from, and then you write the URL. But it's the magazine where you got it from. So in this case, it's called the Vegetarian Times. That's a magazine in this case. So the website is vegetariantimes.com, and that's all you have to write. So retrieve from vegetariantimes.com. If one were to go to this website, we could actually look up the article through the volume number. You see here we only have a volume number. We do not have an issue number, but we do have pages. If there's no DOI and there's no author, well, then you always begin with the title. So we have here an example. We don't have an author's name. We don't have a DOI. So we actually begin with the title. Remember, it's written like a sentence unless there is a colon, and then the first word after the colon is capitalized. So the title, then we have the date, then we have where, which is the NEA today in italics, comma, volume, issue number, comma, page 34, again no P. Because we don't have a DOI, we have to say retrieve from And then where did we get it? We got it from neatoday.org. Here's an example of a newspaper. Everything is basically the same that we talked about, except in this case, it's notable that you can see it's page P period E1. Let me go back to internet source. So most internet sources don't have an author's name, but you have to put the name of the actual article. When was it published? And who this came from the website for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which is the www.cdc.gov Obesity Causes Index HTML. So you would actually look for the HTML that's at the top wherever you got this article. You can have a look at book on your own. Most of you will not be using books for this particular assignment. So it's important that you understand the concept of how to do a references page. So I'm going to do a little practice activity with you. And this practice activity is exactly like you will be doing for the APA skills assessment. So on the skills assessment, which we'll look at in a minute, you're going to have two parts to it. The first part is going to be making a reference page, and the second part is going to be constructing citations. We haven't talked about citations yet. I will get to that at the next part of this video. So on the skills assessment, you will get a picture. And if you look here now, here is a picture from a database entry. This is all the information on here that you will need in order to create a citation. So what I would do is look at your notes, pause the video, and then create the citation. I will go over then the different parts of the citation afterwards. Before you do anything, you want to make sure that your paper is set up so that it has the correct everything on it. So again, the references page is the last page, but for this sake in our skills assessment, we're just going to pretend it's the last page. So the first thing for APA format is to make sure that your font is correct. Well, right now, it is not the right one. I have it set on Cambria. We want to make sure it is Times New Roman 12. So now we have a Times New Roman 12. At the top of our page, we are going to type references. Hit return, and then go back over here. We also now want to make sure that everything on this page is double spaced. So the first thing, working from left to right, the first thing that we said we have to have is the author's name. So here is our author's name here. And remember, we always type the author's name by last name, first initial, and then we have a period. The next thing that comes is our date. And here again, we have our date, February 2003. We always put the year first. Make sure you put it in parentheses. What am I doing? We do the year first, 2003, comma, February. End it with that. And of course, we have a period again after that. So we have the who, we have the when, the next thing is the what, and the what is the actual title. I'm going to move this down here so we can see it and I can type it. Remember, titles are always written like a sentence. And the period. So now's a good point to show you that we need to have what's called a hanging indent. We can do it at this point. So highlight what you have, right click, go to paragraph, and then look for special. Now both of these should be at a 0, and again you should have double selected, but go to special and then choose hanging, and you will see it moves everything in on the second line or the third line so that it is a hanging indent. Every entry after this will always be a hanging indent. You don't have to do that anymore. All right, so we have the title written down. The next thing is to say where it comes from. So here's our source, and this is from something called ONS News. So when you write your source, you always need to put the source in italics. After that, we have a comma, and next comes the volume and the issue number. So here again, we see the volume is 18, issue number 2. Volume numbers are always written in italics. The issue number comes directly after that, but is not in italics. So once you type in your volume number, go back up here, take off the italics, and type in your issue number, and close it out like that. We're still not done because we need page numbers. In this case, there's only one page. We don't use P or PP in this. We just simply write the number 15 because it's only one page. After that, we put our period. So periods go after each section. We have our name section and a period. Even though it's an initial, we just keep the period. We have our date section, period. We have our title section, period. The journal information is the journal name, the issue, the volume, and the page numbers, because that's all belongs together, and then we have a period. So the last thing that we need is to look for either a DOI or we need to have the URL. So if you look carefully here in this entry, we do not see a DOI. So when you do not see a DOI, you automatically have to write retrieved from. And then we want to look at where this comes from. So we have ONS News. You can actually click on ONS News. And at the bottom, it gives you the publisher URL. Now, this information would be given to you automatically on the skills assessment so that you don't have to do that. However, in this case, if you're doing your own research, we want to do this. So here's our URL is www.ons.org, and that's what I'm going to type on here. And to make sure it works, we simply hit the space bar and this opens up. And if you were to click this, it would open up. So that's our first reference for the reference page. So again, on the skills assessment, you're going to see a picture, just like this. You have to then put that information onto your references page. We hit return, and then we'll do one more example, another example together. So this would be another example of what you might see. Again, you're going to actually just see a picture of it. But all of the information on here is what you need to create the citation for the references page. Pause this video and take a moment to create this for yourself, and then I will walk you through it step by step. So far we know that everything always begins with the author's name if we have author's names. In this case, we do, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 authors' names. So you always list the author's names on your reference page in the order in which they are listed here. So we're going to start with Salyers, and we have first name, and we have actually a middle initial. Then comes a comma. Hood, Brittany, J, comma, Schwartz, comma, Catherine, period, comma, Alexander, this is actually the last name, comma, Andrew, and middle initial is O. And then before the last name, you need this so-called ampersand sign. So we still have a comma, then we have the ampersand sign, and then you type like that. There we go. So there we have all our names, commas in between the names. Before the last name, we have the ampersand. Remember, no more than 7 names can go here. If it's just 2, you would put it like Alexander AO and Almza MC. All right. The next thing, well, we have our example above, so we can see the next thing would have to be the date. So let's look for the date on here, and you should have 2015 and April. You see, long as you've created the hanging indent, it does it for you automatically. After the date, we have a period. Next comes this rather long title. Again, written like a sentence, only the first word. So we have our title, that's our what. Now we have to figure out where the where is. Well, we look at our source. This comes from the Journal of Offender Rehabilitation. Again, another long name. Journal of Offender Rehabilitation. And remember, because it's a journal, we want to use italics. We have a comma. We have volume number 54. Volume comes first, and the volume is always in italicized. And then comes the issue number. Remember, unclick the italics. And we have our issue number is 3. After that, we need to have our page numbers. So we have 175 to 193. And if you're stuck, you can look above. After the page number, we have a period. So again, the rule is either you do a DOI or you do a URL. So if you look carefully On this one we have a DOI. It's a rather long DOI, but you have to put the DOI number as is. So the first thing you type in is DOI, and it's written small. After, you have to go back because it's going to automatically want to capitalize it because it thinks it's the end of a sentence. Colon, and then you type the number exactly the way it is written. So let's take a moment and look at the actual skills assessment. I now publish it so you can see it. I didn't want to publish it until you had a chance to look at this video. So it is under APA 5.1, and it is here, skills assessment. I'm going to download it so that it is a bigger copy and we can see it on the screen. So this is what the skills assessment is going to look like. So as I said, basically what we just did, you're going to see a picture and it's going to tell you where it's from. So in this case, this is a database article. So basically all you need to do is you want to look very carefully and see when you get to the end whether or not you have a DOI number. Because if you have a DOI, you have to put the DOI in there. If you don't, you have to put the source, the URL. The second one is another database article. The third one is another database article, and they actually give you the page numbers here. And our fourth one is actually an article from the internet. So the internet is slightly different. So I didn't cover everything in this video, so you need to go back, look carefully at the PowerPoints again, because the PowerPoint will go over how to cite from the internet. However, also, there is an APA guide, and if you were to look up in the APA guide, it gives you some helpful tips as well. You can see how to list the databases, and they give you an example. And then you should be able to find at one point an internet article. They will have that on here as well. So there is a guide. You also have the PowerPoints that will walk you through it. So you're going to create a reference page. As you saw, we have 4 different sources. Remember, you have to put them in alphabetical order. Keep in mind now, if you don't have an author's name, so in some cases, for instance here, we don't have an author's name. Well, you don't start with the date, you have to start with the title of the article. So just keep that in mind. And the title of this article is right here. But look carefully because everything is on here. You have your date, you have where it's from. All of that information is given for you. The only thing special to know about a web page is if you are using a web page, let me go back to if you are using a web page after the actual date or after the actual name of the article, then you use your brackets and you type in web page. Close the bracket. Then you have your period, and then you have the date. So the title would come first. If there's no author, you have your title first. And if it's a web page, you simply type in web page next to it. The W is capitalized, the P is period, small, and then you continue as normal. You would have your date or your year, etc. And all the punctuation then continues the same. All right, but look at the guides because that will give you that. So you have four entries, and so your reference page is going to also have four listed in alphabetical order by either the last name of the author or the name of the article. The second part of the skills assessment and the second PowerPoint that you see deals with citations. So citations occur within the paper. So when you use a quote, whether it's a direct quote or a paraphrase, you need to actually cite in the paper where it came from. And the purpose of the citation in the paper is that it refers to the references page. So when you do a citation, you always need a couple pieces of information. The first piece of information you need is the author's name. And then you need the year. So that's required whether you do a paraphrase or even a direct quote. However, for a direct quote, we need one other thing. Here we need to specify the page numbers. So when you paraphrase something, when you put it in your own words, you don't need to actually put any information down according to the page number. But when you actually use quotation marks, you have to put the page number down. And in this case, you always need a P period if it's just one page. And if it's more than one page, you would then use PP. So again, these you would use for direct quotes. So the only difference is for direct quotes, you use a page number. For a paraphrase, you do not use a page number. So how do we list authors' names? Well, in this case, unlike the reference page, this time we just use the last name of the author. So if we're paraphrasing something and it's just one author, we're going to use the author's name and the date. That's a paraphrase. If there's more than one author, and there's two, you would do something like this. And again, this is a paraphrase, and you can tell it's a paraphrase because there's no page number. So what do you do if you have more than two authors? Well, the rule is if you have three or more, 3 to 5 authors, you will list them all. So I'm going to give you an example. We have Simon, Garfunkel, Smith, and Wesson. And that's how we would do that. Let me extend the page so it's... So when you have more than two, you write out all of the names but you only do this for the first time only. So 3 to 5 names you do for the first time only. After that, you are simply going to take the first name, and then you're going to use something called et al. So it would be then the first name listed, et al. There's no punctuation except after the AL, you have a period and then the comma, and then 2019. If you have one name, you always write it this way. If you have two names, you always write it this way. If you have 3 to 5 names, you only write all of the names out one time, the very first time you use it in the paper. The second, third, fourth time, you simply do it this way. So I keep saying 3 to 5. What happens if you have more than 5? Let's say you have 6 authors' names. Well, in that case, you simply list the first name, and you still do then et al. And you do this from the very beginning. So in the paper, you never list anything more than 5 names. 3 to 5, you list them all. First time only, then et al. If you have 6 or more, you only type it in this way in the actual paper. Now, there are some instances when you don't have an author's name. So the question is then, what do you do in that case? So if we go back to like a web page and there's no author's name. So when you do not have an author, then you simply put in the first 3 words of the title. So let me give an example. It could be the first 2 or 3 words. Let's go with 3. And if we go back to one of our examples here, let's just pretend that this one did not have authors. So in that case, we're going to say the experience impact. So we begin with a quotation mark. The first 3 words of the article, of the title we put in there. The comma goes next. Then you put the quotation mark. So the comma in this case is inside the quotation mark. And then again, we put our year. Now the period would go on the outside. Keep in mind, again, that's all a paraphrase. The only difference would be if it were a direct quote, we need to put the page number in there. Sometimes there are no dates. So if on the reference page or in here there is no date, then you put ND period for no date. The only other thing that you need to know is not everything has page numbers. So if you're looking at a web page, you might not have an actual page number. So in that case, you have to count the paragraphs. And the way to do it would be something similar to, we use this above. And then we have to have our paragraph, and we write PARA for paragraph number, and then 5. Because if it's a direct quote, we do have to give the information where we found it. If there's no page number, then we have to count the paragraphs. So it's always in your best interest to look for a page number so that you don't have to count the number of paragraphs. But again, you only do this in the case that you have a direct quote. So let's go back one more time to the skills assessment. The second part deals with citations. So if you look here, you'll see, using Article 1 above, show how you would format a citation when paraphrasing information. So you go back to Article 1, here's all of the information, and you're going to do a paraphrase. So remember, what do we need for paraphrasing? Well, we need authors' names. Remember the rules, 1, 2, 3 to 5, more than 5. You need a date for a paraphrase. Using Article 1 above, show how you would use format a citation when citing from an article a second time. So there would be a little bit different because we probably have more than one author, so how would you do it the second time? Using Article 2, how would you format a citation when paraphrasing? Then we have one with direct quotes. So you just have to read, and you're going to produce something very similar to what we just did. For the citations part, they're going to look something like this. Okay? You don't have to write a quote out, you're just writing the citation part. So the author's name and the date, or page numbers. If you don't have an author's name, you're going to make sure that you have the article name in there, the first 3 words of the article name and the date. So this was definitely a longer video, nearly 50 minutes, but this kind of replaces what you would get in a normal face-to-face instruction where we would go over this and practice it in class. Hopefully you've taken notes. You should now know how pretty much to do the references page. You should know how to do citations, and hopefully you have an idea now of what you're going to be doing in terms of the skills assessment. Please look at all the material. Go back, look at the PowerPoints, both of the PowerPoints, look at the APA guide, go back over your notes. If you have to listen to this video a second time, then listen to it a second time, take notes along the way, and then start doing the APA skills assessment. In terms of APA, you can submit the skills assessment as many times as you need to for the next 2 weeks. So the deadline is going to be in 2 weeks. So you'll submit it, and it's all or nothing. If you have one thing wrong, whether it's a comma, whether it is something out of the order, but even if it's just as small as a comma, if you're missing a comma, you will get the skills assessment back, and you have to redo it. At the end of 2 weeks, hopefully you will have turned it in and it will have been perfect. As soon as it is correct 100%, you will get 30 points. If you have a mistake, you'll get it back and you'll redo. For this skills assessment is all or nothing. So you're either going to get 30 points or you're going to get 0 points. So do not wait. Start kind of working on it, submit it, and then I will tell you whether or not you have everything correct. So if you still have any questions, then shoot me an email. If it is more complicated of an answer, then I suggest that you either stop by my office if you're in the Georgetown or the Owens campus. Although you can give me a call. My office number is listed under contact information. Or I can meet with you virtually in my virtual office as long as you have a camera, and we can kind of talk face to face that way. So should you not understand, then please ask so that we can get a head start on this. All right, so good luck on the APA skills assessment, and I'll be looking also towards getting your topics for the exemplification paper this week.